Good morning with Ottometric. We are based in Boston with offices in Europe, and we provide AI-powered data intelligence for the automotive market. Okay? So as you can imagine, we'll be talking a lot about data. So I don't think I need to tell anyone this, but we're all drowning in data. Cars of today have very little resemblance to cars of 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago. Basically, cars today are computers on wheels, and they're generating lots and lots of data. So ADAS validation today, on average, a program is generating over 30 petabytes of data, and it costs hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And it's getting worse, and you'll see why. So we have the fortunate position of working across many major players in the automotive industry. So we get to see a lot of different perspectives. And this is basically a concentration of all those perspectives. So from our viewpoint, there's a few factors that are resulting in this data deluge. And chief among them is regulations. Safety is paramount, and that's of course driving more stringent regulations. You have GSR and NCAP in Europe. You have NHTSA in America, Bharat NCAP in India, and so on and so forth. So many different geographies, many different regulations, all driving safety, but those are ever changing and they're getting stricter. The other part is customer expectations. Over-the-air updates are now expected as routine. Customers are simply expecting more from automakers, and OTA updates aren't cheap. There's a lot of data involved in reprocessing all of that, right? And then finally, ADAS features themselves are getting more complex with every generation. New features are being added, and they're becoming more and more standard inclusions in new vehicles. So there's new electronics enabling these new ADAS features, which is great, but they're also better than ever before, and they're generating a lot more data. So if you look at all these factors, it's generating a ton more data than we're used to. And of course, the flip side of that is profitability takes a big hit, especially Western automakers. You can see these in their numbers. The profitability keeps going down. Quality drops. We continue to work with customers who are under severe SOP deadline pressure. So they're forced to cut corners that they don't want to. And that has an impact on quality. And finally, of course, the data impact. And it's the cost of the data, not just during the validation phase, but during the lifetime of the program. Think 10 years. You're storing 10, 20, 30 petabytes of data for 10 years, and that cumulative cost is astronomical. So from our eyes, the current path we're all on is unsustainable, and we really need to be innovating our way out of this. And we think at Ottometric, there's a few ways we can help kind of carve out a new path here, right? So we have quite a few sets of IP and technologies that we can bring to the table. You can see those listed on the left side here. It's a combination of hundreds of man-years of expertise in AI, computer vision, big data, and machine learning that we can bring to bear to basically provide intelligent data orchestration, compute KPIs at scale, and find, and this might seem awfully specific, but it'll become clear why that's important, finding edge and rare scenarios in a mountain of data, right? We are really good at that. And what that ultimately means, on average, we can run 6 times faster. This is a typical ADAS validation program, a lot cheaper, and of course, with improved quality. That's what we're able to find with customer programs that we've been working on. And I will show you in a few minutes how we're able to generate these savings, time, cost, and quality savings. But before I go there, let me quickly introduce you to our platform. So it's a set of modular products. Many of the customers that we work with, OEMs and tier ones, typically they already have an existing tool chain. And there's many parts of it that are quite effective, and they certainly like them. So we're not here to tell you that you need to replace your entire tool chain, okay? So if there's parts of your tool chain that you like, no problem. But there are things in specific areas that either you're lacking or they're too slow or too expensive that we think we can make you run faster, cheaper, or better. In that case, we can provide APIs and you can integrate us into your existing tool flow and you can still keep the parts of your tool chain that you like, you can still keep those, right? There are those rare cases where we've had customers basically ask us for end-to-end validation tool flow. We can do that as well. But in most cases, we basically integrate into your existing tool flows. So let me briefly talk about those. Symphony is all about managing and orchestrating your data. This is right from collection, ingest, filter, label, meta tag, and of course, synchronize it now across wherever you store your data. It could be on the cloud with AWS or on-prem or some type of hybrid setup. We can do that. And any given ADAS validation program, chances are you're working with multiple vendors, not one or two, and we can provide a single pane of glass interface to manage seamlessly across all those vendors, across the different types of storage. So that's Symphony, that's orchestrating your data seamlessly. Clarity, this is really important because you're sitting on 10, 20, 30 petabytes of data and you're looking for really small pieces of insight. And that's where we have IP using a combination of AI, CV techniques, as well as our SPR, the scenario prioritization ranking IP that we can bring to bear. And you'll see that in a customer example in a second. And ultimately, the all-important certification and homologation of data. This is what you need to do to get to SOP, right? So we have proprietary innovative techniques that we've developed that we use to automate generation of ground truth. Now, this is KPI-focused ground truth. It's slightly different than what you traditionally think of ground truth, but they're very much focused on the KPIs that you're going after. It allows us to generate ground truth a lot faster and certainly a whole lot cheaper than traditional annotation methods. Even those semi-automated annotation methods, we're still faster and cheaper than that. And all that translates to being able to generate KPI reports a whole lot faster, meeting your quality goals, and hitting that certification and homologation goals, okay? So that's the platform, and tying it all together is our purpose-built visualization tool called AutoView. Many of you use, I'm sure, all kinds of visualization tools. We have customers who use just the visualization piece, so there is something to the intuitiveness of our tool, of the visualization part, that even that would be worth checking out. So after the session, actually, we're happy to provide a demo if anybody would like to see that. But let's now look at those customer cases I was referring to. So this is a North American tier one, and they were trying to get a brand new EV to market. Very tight timelines, and they collected an immense amount of data because this was a brand new platform that they or anyone else had ever seen, right? So the first thing we did was ingest all their data, filtered it, took all the usable data and visualized it very quickly. This allowed the engineering team to start really touching that data, which was important. Again, brand new platform, brand new lots of things. And as they were starting to touch the data, the KPI definitions that they started out with, they realized they needed to change some of that. So once they gave us the refined KPIs, we generated the automated ground truth. Again, this is the KPI-focused ground truth, not the generic ground truth. And we were able to basically provide them with the KPI reports. That's their very first pass, and this entire turnaround was a matter of weeks, okay? Based on that, they got a first sense of how the perception stack was doing, how the electronics was doing, and they started to make software and firmware revisions, do those hill and SIL reruns a lot faster, and then we repeat this entire cycle. So change the KPIs, change the software, change the firmware, and keep repeating this. Important to note, if we didn't rely on AWS for those KPI computes, there is no way we could have done this that fast, right? It's one thing to use on-prem for storage, and you could keep increasing it, but it's another to get those S3 compute surges to be able to do KPIs at scale with this level of data. So that's where the power of AWS really comes in handy in a situation like this, when you're trying to compute a large amount of KPIs on an immense amount of data at scale. So that's us. That's our North American customer. This is a very interesting one. We worked with a European OEM. We thought at the time this was a unique problem, and then we've been talking to a lot of customers since then. Turns out this is not very unique. And this customer, it was a global collect. They collected petabytes of data worldwide. So this involved basically extracting hard drives from the collection vehicles over a period of weeks, and then shipping them all into one central location in Europe for processing. And many of these drives, believe it or not, got stuck in customs. That, as old school and bizarre it sounds, turns out this actually happens quite a bit. Then ultimately all this data gets to the headquarters, lots of on-prem processing, more cycles spent because they were basically stymied by the availability of compute. Takes them almost 6 months to get their very first insights on the data that they collected. And turns out over 50% of the data they collected months ago was scrapped, simply unusable. And of the remaining data that they do have that's usable, turns out a lot of scenarios that they were interested in, they didn't have corresponding data for. So they sent the vehicles back out on the roads globally, started processing again, combined it with the existing usable data, but they lost months, missed their SOP, quality suffered, and as you can imagine, super expensive, right? So that's the problem they came to us with, and what we basically innovated, especially with AWS, is a new way of doing this. We started with the scenarios that they were really interested in, developed a drive plan. So that basically tells the drivers exactly what to do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. And as the data was getting collected, at the end of each day, the drive comes to us. We make a local copy for backup because they wanted that safety and security. And then it goes to an AWS upload center, and we see the data in 24 hours. And we start processing this. Within 48 hours of us seeing the data in the VPC, we provide the first insights. And insights including things like the data collected that day, did it add any incremental value toward that drive plan, or was it all redundant data? And there's additional insights, but it's that type of near real-time insight that allowed them to course correct and change the drive plan dynamically so that, and because you're catching all of this on the front end of the validation chain, the time and cost savings then percolate throughout the rest of the validation chain. So we effectively took them from a months-long process to what was ultimately measured in weeks, and we're now getting into production with this. So this was immensely successful, and there's absolutely no reason why we should be doing things the old way. This can scale to really any customer. And the last one I'll talk about here, another European customer, they actually did start with some very high value scenarios. And by that, I mean, in their previous programs, they repeatedly kept running into some scenarios where their electronics simply weren't behaving as expected. So repeated, consistent KPI failures. So that's what they were honing in on. And it's hard to collect data when you're running it on high value scenarios. So they ended up collecting petabytes of data, and we provided an entire tool chain to basically follow a process to ultimately identify those high value scenarios. So you start at the bottom, ingest, filter, and then explore your full data set with our visualization tool, AutoView. Then we have a tool called Scene Scout, natural language search. So basic searches, look for blue cars in roundabouts, things like that, right? And that gives you some intelligence. And then you run our SPR process. This is scenario prioritization ranking. That takes however much data you have, distills it into common and rare buckets of data, and you use this collective knowledge to then really define specific scenarios. And that's the top of the pyramid, where you're basically looking at your KPIs. Based on the KPIs, you define these high-value scenarios, and then you run targeted SPR. You're effectively finding needles in a haystack. And all of that results in this guy. Basically, there's a small amount of data, ultimately, that we're all interested in, that not this mountain of data. And that's what the SPR process gets you, okay? Okay, so as hopefully you've seen from the 3 case studies, we work with a lot of different customers, and this is what the partnership of AWS and Ottometric can do for you. Faster, cheaper, better, right? The speed and scale of the cloud combined with the optimization that AI and CV can bring to you. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Raj. Big round of applause for Raj, please. Very good from Ottometric.